Is the Mayor there, mate?
Yes, good afternoon, councillors. I've just recorded, pressed the record button for the council meeting. It is now 1 p.m. and I'll hand over to the chair, Councillor Greg Keys.
Thank you, Shane. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Georgetown Council meeting of Tuesday, the 26th.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Bauer, can you repeat that?
She just joined the meeting, Mr. Mayor, and I've just placed her on mute.
Thank you. So I'll repeat that. Welcome to everybody. Welcome to the Georgetown Council meeting, Tuesday, the 26th of March. I will first do the acknowledgement of country. The Georgetown Council pays its respect to the traditional and original owners of the land in which we meet, their elders past, present and emerging, and we pay respect to those that have passed before us and acknowledge today's Tasmanian Aboriginal people who are the custodians of this land. Now, as everybody is aware, under the COVID-19 situation, there are slightly different operating procedures. And in accordance with that, these meetings are held in this digital format. All the councillors have elected to use both their video and audio feeds, bar Councillor Barwick, who is elected not to use her video feed. Councillor Barwick will be using the emoticon of a raised hand when she wishes to speak. And as such, I'll be doing the best job I can to try to keep track of all the various different speakers. It is a bit of a juggling act, trying to watch all the visual cues and make them all work, but I'll be giving it a best go. Let's see where we are. Firstly, let's start with present. We have, yes, Councillor Harris, do you want to say anything or just raising a hand to say you're present?
Acknowledgement of country.
Thank you very much. I've done the acknowledgement of country, Councillor. Hold on. Right, there we go. Present, we have Councillor Tim Harris, the Deputy Mayor. We have Councillor Barraclough. Handy, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Barwick is the blue little screen. Councillor Brooks. There's Councillor Brooks in the top right. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Greg Dawson, middle on the left. Councillor Winston Mason, middle on the right. Councillor Andrew Micheletto, so second row from the bottom in the centre. G'day, Andrew. Councillor Peter Parks. Where's Peter? Peter's second row on the right. In attendance, we also have Shane Power, the General Manager. We have Cheryl Hyde, the Manager of Corporate Services and Finance, the Manager of Works and Infrastructure, David Richardson, the Manager of Development and Environment, Rex Cassidy, the Manager of Livable and Connected Communities, Megan Bennett. Where's Megan? Megan's dropped off the bottom of the screen. Oh, there he is. She's not using the video feed right now. And the Manager of People, Performance and Governance, Brent Dare. Okay. Apologies and leave of absence. To my knowledge, there are none. There is one forward notice. The Deputy Mayor will be leaving the meeting just a little bit on the early side. He has another commitment starting at 4 p.m. So, Deputy, no problem. We'll make a note on the record when that time arrives. Confirmation of the minutes. So we're first going to start with item 2.1, the ordinary council meeting held on the 24th of March. Do I have a mover for the recommendation? Thank you. So we'll start with Deputy Mayor Harris as the mover. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dawson. Yeah. Okay. And Dawson. Thank you.
Councillor Harris.
Yeah, over to you.
Nothing further to add but to accept the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Dawson.
We've workshopped this item. Everything's true and correct and as it should be.
happy to put it forward, and hope everyone else sees it as just receiving the report.
Thank you. Any speakers either for or against the motion? Councillor Barwick.
Mr. Chair, I speak against the acceptance of the report as it is written. What is written here is not what actually happened on that day. There was an adjournment called, but not recorded. The way that it is recorded here of who left the meeting and what time and what happened and what went on is not what actually happened in these minutes, and I do not support the minutes as they stand that you are approving now.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask the General Manager to comment on that, because we did conduct an investigation, a thorough investigation into both the notes recorded as well as the video and audio recording of the meeting, as well as sought guidance from the local government of Association of Tasmania in terms of the best operating procedure when there is conflict around whether or not meetings are deemed to be accurate or not. So Shane, if you care to just briefly take the council through your findings and through the feedback we've received.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think Councillor Dawson has also mentioned that this has been subject to a workshop, in which case I presented to council at the time our interpretation of the accuracy of the minutes. In particular, there's one item that Councillor Barwick is disputing in terms of whether or not a second adjournment was called or not. While the word was used, their interpretation was it is not compliant or in effect with what is required under the regulations, and therefore was not recorded as such. All other actions and happenings that happened within the meeting at that point in time, officers believe have been accurately recorded, presented to council for their comment, and those have been incorporated into the minutes that are before you. And I have sought and received advice from the Director's Office, as we have been informed that there may be a challenge against these minutes from an external party that has absolutely no bearing on the decision of this council to endorse the minutes as it sees fit. If the director or any other investigative body finds that the minutes are not true and correct in their mind at a later date, those minutes can then be brought back before a council to be ratified, and should have no bearing on the decision of the council at the moment on the current minutes as are before them.
Thank you, Shane. Councillor Barwick, you had a question?
Mr. Chairman, I actually would like to ask your permission. If I heard that the General Manager said the second adjournment, I never made a comment about a second adjournment. I just referred to an adjournment. That was all.
Thank you. So just again, to all councillors, I just ask everyone to please just observe the standard protocol of meeting procedures, something that I'll be looking at and enforcing, and that is that by all means, every councillor has an opportunity to speak to each motion once and then to ask questions. So no repeat talking to the motion, no expression of opinions that will unduly influence the balance of opinion when considering motions. All right, with that, are there any other people who want to speak to this item? Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a question. What are the ramifications if the minutes are being reviewed and there may be a possibility that they're not correct? What are the ramifications if we don't support them rather than support them and then find out later that they were not correct? What are the ramifications, I guess, is what I'm asking for us when we make a decision.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Through the chair to the General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In this instance, my understanding is the only challenge of whether or not an adjournment was called that has been lodged with the director. That has no bearing on the decision of council moving forward, given that all councillors were present and voting on the decisions of council that day. So I'd find that if a procedural part of that meeting was to be challenged and upheld, I don't think it bears any finding or any action of council as a result of decisions you made that day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Anybody else? before I return it back to the mover? Thank you. Deputy Mayor, to close.
Further to add?
Nothing further to add. With that, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Okay, and I'm going to read everyone's name. I can't quite get everybody to fit in the screen, so let's start. Okay, so in favour is Councillor Keyser, Councillor Brooks, Councillor Parks, Councillor Barraclough, Councillor Harris, Councillor Dawson, Councillor Mason, Councillor Micheletto. Against is Councillor Barwick. Thank you, Councillor Barwick. All right, the motion is carried by 8 to 1. Okay. Late items. There is a late item. So point 3, and the late item is the consideration of a report.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. 2.2, if you don't mind.
I missed it, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Mayor. It's might be a little bit confusing in the agenda. We've got two minutes being moved.
I'm so sorry. That is quite correct. So 2.1, we just recorded. 2.2 again. Let's call that 2.2. Do I have a mover for 2.2 for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Mason, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Parks, thank you, Councillor Parks. Councillor Mason.
Nothing further. No.
Councillor Parks.
Thanks.
Any speakers either for or against the motion? Councillor Barwick.
Mr. Chairman, I speak against the motion, the minutes as they are recorded here. I believe that all points of order that are put up at any council meeting has to be recorded, albeit that I called the point of order on our General Manager at that last council meeting for him speaking on a procedural motion that was put forward by the council. Thank you.
Through the chair to the General Manager.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd happily take that upon review, but I don't think that has any bearing on whether or not council needs to ratify the minutes within them, with the condition that the General Manager reviews the audio to see whether or not that point of order in fact needs to be recorded or not. But my recommendation would stand that the minutes of that council meeting are true and accurate, with the exception of what Councillor Heather has raised today, which we'll review. But with that in mind, I think the minutes can still be ratified in terms of all decisions made.
I agree. That sounds acceptable given the advice that we've received. So I don't think it has a material bearing on the outcome. Noted though, if you can please just review it, and if there is an update or a correction required, if you could please make that to the record, that'd be appreciated. Councillor Barwick.
I'd just like to ask a question. Can all councillors have a copy of this information that you are talking about having received in your hand? Thank you.
Yes, in short. I don't think that needs to go to the General Manager. It's freedom of information, no problem. All right, we've had anybody else who wants to speak to the motion? I'm seeing none. I'll hand it back to Councillor Mason to close.
Nothing further. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. With that, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. And again, I'll read the names. So Councillor Keyser 4, Councillor Brooks 4, Councillor Parks 4, Councillor Barraclough 4, Councillor Harris 4, Councillor Dawson 4, Councillor Mason, Councillor Micheletto. Against, I'm going to assume, is Councillor Barwick. So the motion is carried 8 to 1. Thank you. Thank you. Takes us to item 3, late items. As I mentioned, there is a late report which the General Manager has tabled for consideration. We will call this item 3.1. The councillors have a copy of that report. I'm assuming that we will need a mover. The mover is Councillor Harris. Thank you, Councillor Harris. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dawson. Councillor Harris.
Nothing further to discuss because it's going to close meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Dawson.
Yep, ditto.
Thank you very much. Any speakers either for or against the motion? Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to speak against the motion, but I am limited to what I can say due to the confidential nature that's been flagged within the motion. So I'm going to stick to meeting regulations, and I would put forward that it does not meet the meeting regulations to be considered a late item. The fact that the officer did not have the report ready in time for the agenda does not qualify it, and the general manager has indicated he feels it's time sensitive. But I disagree with that. There are no timeframes that are required to be met for us to consider this as an urgent item.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Any other speakers to the motion? Councillor Barwick.
Mr. Chairman, I also do not accept this item as a late item, again, as Councillor Brooks has mentioned. But to me, again, getting something like this, that's, and I better be careful what I say too, something like this and expected to spend 5 minutes looking at it and bringing it to the table, it's not how I like to do business if it doesn't have to happen in such a short time. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'll speak for the motion only for those who are looking at these proceedings to say that I have reviewed the general manager's case. It is an item that is in confidence. However, in my determination, I agree with the general manager that it is time sensitive in nature. There are commercial ramifications and implications if this information is not acted in a timeous manner. So that's my personal determination. I think that it does qualify under those stipulations. Any other speakers for or against the motion? Okay, with that, I'll return it back to the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Harris, to close.
Still nothing to add.
Thank you very much. With that, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour of accepting item 3.1, please raise your hand. We have Councillor Keyser, we have Councillor Parks, Councillor Barraclough, Councillor Harris, Councillor Dawson, Councillor Mason, Councillor Micheletto. Against, please raise your hand. We have Councillor Brooks.
And myself, thank you, Councillor Barwick.
Thank you, Councillor. If you could just use the emoticon, that would just make things a little bit easier, but thank you very much. The motion is carried 7-2. Okay, thank you. Item 4, which is public question time. And again, in the last meeting, I read through all of the ramifications of the change in format, given that these meetings are not held in person, so we can't have a public gallery. In short, the public is encouraged to submit their questions in writing. There's both a more extended period, questions on notice, as well as a limited duration time frame for questions without notice. On that note, I have a question from Ms. Hickling, and I'm going to read it because that is our commitment, that we would read all of these received for the record. So just bear with me. Ms. Hickling says, my question to council work is, are you considering supporting non-compliant camping out at Beechwood? This was evidence from the letter written by Stephen Bruneveld on behalf of the Beechwood Residents and the Property Owners Association in response to the planning matter regarding the Beechwood Community Shed and Barbecue Area. That was the agenda item 16.1 in April 2020. The intended purpose of the community shed and barbecue area is to primarily serve the local community of Beechwood, where planning use was determined to be community meeting and entertainment. It was admitted by Mr. Bruneveld that campers and visitors from outside the community use the barbecue area, and that an influx of caravans, campers will outgrow the present building and its requirements. It is clear in the letter that the Beechwood community wish to encourage and increase the number of campers using the proposed mountain bike trail project to justify their reasons and hence not utilise the shed for its intended purpose as determined by Council's planner. The area in question is controlled by a public entity, being the Georgetown Council, and camping under competitive neutrality policy and procedures is considered a significant business activity, irrespective of whether a fee is charged for the use of the facilities provided. Under policy guidelines, the public entity must assess the total number of non-powered camping sites within a geographical market area of 60 kilometres from the public camping facility. If the total number of non-powered public camping sites provided by the public entity is more than 10% of the total number of non-powered camping sites within the geographic market, the public entity must apply full cost attribution principles. The public entity must first consult with their communities, including commercial camping providers, and undertake a public benefit assessment to ensure there are net benefits within the community and no harm is caused to the market through unfair competition. The lack of potable water and facilities is a major concern, especially with the outbreak of COVID-19, where lack of proper sanitation is a serious public health risk to our vulnerable community. The lack of no black water dump point on the site has resulted in fecal matter not being correctly disposed of, and there has been evidence by online reviews from campers communicating their disgust that the toilet paper left in the bushes. I seriously doubt that council would believe that this is a positive image for tourism, and hence for all the above reasons I question why council will want to consider supporting it. And the response from the general manager is that no, council is not considering supporting non-compliant camping. Council is aware of occurrences of non-permitted camping at the Beechwood Reserve, also known as the Beechwood Sports Ground. Council has commenced discussions with representatives of the Beechwood Residents and Property Owners Association Incorporated, who have expressed an interest in managing a short-term accommodation facility at the reserve. Any such operation will be required to comply with competitive neutrality policy, building regulations, and will be subject to appropriate consultation processes. Council may consider placing physical barriers to the reserve, failing an appropriate solution to short-term accommodation. Thank you, Ms. Hicklin, for your question. Questions on notice are item 4.4. Councillor Brooks, yes, Councillor Barwick, your hand is up. Sorry, my head was down.
Yeah, look, up or down, which is the one you want? If I vote against it, I'll put the hand with the thumb up. If
Yes.
I'm voting against it, and the other one, right? So I get to know that. Look, I would like.
As long as when I call, voting for, you use the hand, and I call voting against, you use the hand, so I know which bucket you fall into. That's great.
Okay.
If there isn't
Okay.
a vote, almost any of those little gestures will do, as long as it catches my eye.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move a motion from the floor, if I might, and it goes back to item 4.2. And the motion from the floor that I'd like to move is that the report of the Beechwood residents, Beechwood Shed and Barbecue report that went from our council table to a workshop be brought back now to our table for discussion and for a decision to be made on the recommendations that were in that report that we received at our workshop. It came from a motion at the council table, a request at the council table to go to a workshop, but it has not come back, and I believe that everything that we send from a council workshop technically to a workshop technically should come back to where it started, and I believe this one needs to come back to the council table for the decisions and the discussion on the recommendations from Mr. Cassidy.
So the only question I would ask to the general manager is, should we petition to include all, or should we include all motions without notice in section 16, which is the formal agenda section for motions or questions without notice?
Well, there's a specific area for that, Mr. Mayor, but my understanding is that the council can move a motion from the floor regardless.
Okay. I don't think I need to get approval from everybody, but because I'm a nice fella, is everybody kind of happy to continue with that sort of operating structure, that we take questions from the floor when each issue arises? A general sort of nod so I can get a bit of a barometer. Everyone? I'm not seeing any nods, actually.
Only thing I'd add to that, Mr. Mayor, is that it has been accepted practice in the past.
Let's stick with it. There's no point rocking the boat. Let's just stick with it. Okay, so let's just... Heather, are you happy with the motion that you put in place as recorded by...
I'm just reading it now, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted, yes, it's actually to bring the report back that we had at our workshop, which was a quite a comprehensive report that came back out to us. And I believe now there's a lot of issues being handled there. We need to bring it forward to see whether we're going to have agreements made, or how we're going to address the issue out there of the shed. And it all started to do with what was the category of the shed that was it a shed that was to be a storage shed, or was it a community shed? And that's how this all started. And
So-
it needs to be addressed.
So for my benefit, just help me to understand. So we already have workshopped. So you, at the previous meeting, you raised the issue of whether the shed was had appropriate clearances and approvals in place.
At a council meeting, not a workshop.
Correct. And then at the last workshop, my understanding is we did
Yeah.
work on that item. We had the Manager of Development and Environment who presented a rather thorough report on the findings
Yes.
on that issue. So that report, which he has already presented, is not sufficient in your opinion.
No, that was a report that now needs to come back to the table, the council table. That's what I'm asking, that report comes back to the council table for us to address it from where it started.
I'm going to take a question from Councillor Brooks, because I often draw on her for her subject matter expertise in these areas. Guide us here, please, Justine.
Thank you, Mayor. My recollection is that the report that came to the council table was for information only. There wasn't a decision or a recommendation to be made, and that's why we sent it to the workshop. If that could be clarified quickly, that would probably resolve this. I don't think it needs to come back to a council meeting. I think it was only ever an information report.
Correct. But I don't think it contradicts what was already the original approval that was in place. I think it reinforced it by memory. So we have a binding decision that's in place, and we'd be bringing back the report which recommends we reinforce the decision that's in place. That's the part that I'm confused about. Okay, I'll tell you what we do is I'm going to hand that one. What we'll do is we'll defer that item, and we'll have a look at it in workshop to make sure that we aren't turning ourselves in loops. By my estimation, it's unnecessary, given that we're ratifying something that we've already ratified. But we'll have that discussion in an open and frank manner. And if that's not the case, then happy to bring it to a council meeting. Are you happy with that, Mr. General Manager? Sound reasonable enough?
I'm happy with that direction, Mr. Mayor. I'd be interested to see on Councillor Barwick's comments, obviously being the mover of the motion from the floor, on whether or not you'd like to just follow with that procedure to see whether or not it's carried or not.
I think that is actually a good idea. Let's actually put that motion in place, and then if there is a balance of opinion that supports that, then we can move that. So, so Councillor Barwick, are you ready to move that motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so Councillor Barwick has moved the motion. Do I have a seconder for her motion, as written on the screen next to you? I'll call one more time. Do I have a seconder? There being no seconder, the motion has lapsed. Thank you, Councillor Barwick. All right. Okay, so item 4.4, I just want to note in the record that Councillor Brooks has lodged a question on notice. Again, it pertains to an item which will be dealt with in closed session, but the record will reflect that there has been a question received. Thank you. Councillor Dare, I just saw your text message. I think we did have a seconder and that lapsed, so we should be good. Thank you. So item 4.5, responses to questions from previous public question time. There was the question from the Australian Services Union. I'm just going to let the record reflect that the question and response is as noted in the agenda. It's recorded, so we have responded to that as we said we would. Yes, Councillor Brooks.
My question loosely pertains to the situation more so than the question by the ASU. I note the General Manager's response is that because the matter is operational in nature, that there's not going to be a published response in the agenda, but that concerns me because it sets a precedent that any operational type questions would not be answered in the agenda, and yet we do have members of the community raise operational matters from time to time. So I just thought maybe some clarification on the fact that it's to do with staff might be the actual issue, not necessarily just operational. Can I confirm that that's the case?
Through the chair to the General Manager, sounds like a reasonable request.
That's certainly the case in this instance, yes. Yep.
I'll just note as well that when this was originally tabled, that there was an element of coordination that was happening through LEGAT, given that it is a sector-wide response.
Yep. Mr. Mayor, if I may, I have noticed a typo in the General Manager's response there in the title, General Manager. If they could be corrected for the minutes, it's in the second line of that response.
Gotcha. I've made a note and I'll pass it on to Louise at the end. All right, thank you very much. Okay, item 5, declaration of interest. Are there any real or perceived declarations of interest? Councillor Barwick.
Mr. Chairman, before you moved off your questions, public questions, did you not receive a question from Mrs. Rainbow re the minutes of April?
They're not recorded in the pack I have, Mr. General Manager.
Not that I'm aware of, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. If that's not the case,
Thank you.
I don't know what we can do. What's the middle ground? If you can find it, and we'd certainly be happy to circulate it and respond to it, but nothing we're aware of.
No, I was told it was coming in, and you didn't bring it up, so maybe it just didn't get here.
Okay.
So that's why I asked the question.
We're always happy to answer any questions that come in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Declaration of interest. So any real or perceived declarations of interest. So I'm first going to hand to the Deputy Mayor, Deputy Mayor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure if I really have to declare an interest in the planning issue, item 7.1. I am an employee of the overarching company, but not a direct employee of the company that's requesting the changes to the allowances for that place at 31 Goulburn. But I will partake in discussion and have a vote. But I just thought that I will declare that I do work for the overarching company, but not necessarily the direct company. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And the Deputy Mayor and I have discussed the issue in my determination. He's being very good to declare what could be perceived otherwise, but he really does have no direct conflict, operational or otherwise, that should influence his vote. So I'm happy with that being an accurate determination. Does anybody else have any other real or perceived? Councillor Parks.
Sorry, mate. I've lost the number just for now, but I just wanted to put it out there that I am a member of the Community Pride Group, that there is an agenda item here, so I can't find the number, But I don't believe that's a conflict that I need to withdraw myself from. Just again, making people aware that I'm a part of that group.
It's at item 13.3, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. And again, I agree. Thank you so much for your transparency. I agree. I think that it should not impair your capacity to make a vote in your councillor capacity. Any other conflicts of interest, real or perceived? I think we're looking good. Thank you, councillors. Item 6 is the General Manager's declaration as noted. Thank you, Mr. General Manager. And item 7, on to planning authority issues. Item 7.1 regards alterations to an existing building to allow for the building to be partially used for community purposes and partially used for single dwelling at the 31st of 31 Goulburn Street. I'm going to quickly find the officer's recommendation.
And while you're doing that, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I've just permitted Council Strategic Planner James Stewart into the meeting as well. You'll see him up on your screen now. So James is also the author of the report should Council have any question relating to this matter. And I note that the recommendation commences on page 60, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. You read my mind. Okay. So you're right, the correct recommendation starts at the bottom of page 60, and the recommendation is to approve. Do I have a mover for the officer's recommendation for item 7.1 commencing on the bottom of page 60? I'll ask one more time. Do I please have a mover for the officer's recommendation of item 7.1? Thank you, Councillor Parks. And I'm going to take Councillor Harris as being the seconder. Thank you, Councillor Parks. Councillor Parks.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I think it's I think the building has not been used for some time, so it's good to see that someone's considering using it as a community facility and also a dwelling. I think moving the recommendation as it sits with all the following conditions protects council and the community during the phase of those alterations and the community use, parking and what have you. Yeah, I think it's all there in the report, and I haven't really got much to say about it, but I think it's, you know, it's good that the building is being used and it's being used in a community capacity. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parks. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. I am familiar with the building currently, and it's got a couple of lots using it. St Vincent de Paul use it and Catholic Care use it, only partially, and I must say that it's fallen into a bit of disrepair. So the fact that it won't be falling any further into disrepair and will be done up and utilised fully is a good idea for the building. So that's why I would wholeheartedly support it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. All right, let's put that one to the floor. Are there any other speakers for or against? Any questions? Councillor Dawson.
It's just like, I suppose, to recognise that this is probably one of the first facilities that will provide for an opportunity for homeless people in our community to be able to go in and wash and shower and that type of thing, and do it in a safe environment. And I think it's something that's needed. I mean, a lot of people find themselves, you know, in that situation throughout their lives. And if the first thing, a little bit of personal pride is to be able to keep yourself hygienic and nice and clean, I think it's a good addition to our community. I'll just put that there.
Thank you, Councillor Dawson. Any other speakers?
Mr. Mayor, I did notice Councillor Barwick's hand raised.
Thank you very much. Actually, you're right. I forget that. Councillor Barwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, as a councillor, I sit here on this committee as a planning committee, and I need to vote accordingly to the report that's compiled by a qualified planner. Having said that, I read the letter that was attached to this document from an unknown gentleman, but it was written to, I think, you, Mayor, about the concerns for the people that no longer can use this building, attend their Bible classes, hold their meetings and that. And I'd just like to have it recorded that as a councillor, I feel for their sadness that they are going through, but as a councillor sitting on a planning committee, my role is to act as a planning committee person and take notice of our qualified planner, but I do feel sad for those losses. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barwick. And just let the record also reflect that Council did approach the originators of the development application to let them know that the feedback had been received, and they instructed us to please commence with the development application unaltered. So the feedback has been received and recorded, and it stands. Right, any other speakers? With that, I'll return it to Councillor Parks to close.
I have nothing to add to that. But thank you to the councillors for the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'll put that to a vote. All of those in favour of item 7.1, please raise your hand. Okay, and we'll read them out. We have Councillor Keyser, Councillor Brooks, Councillor Harris, Councillor Barraclough, Councillor Parks, Councillor Dawson, Councillor Micheletto, Councillor Barwick, and Councillor Mason. We have a unanimous motion. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, before you move on, I'd like to move a motion from the floor. The motion is that the draft contract for transfer of gifted land titles to 504 Woolcock Court and 122 Franklin Street, as per the motion of the council, be brought to a workshop for us to look at. It was part of a motion that we were to see that. I've asked for it, been told we will get it. We're now moved on, and I'd, even though it's no doubt all been signed, as a council, I believe we should see what we have asked to see, and I'd like it to move forward.
Through the chair to the General Manager.
Mr. Mayor, through you, if I may, and it may, Councillor Barwick, satisfy you to the point where you may reconsider them or not. That's up to you. But the motion still stands, and the action to bring that contract to sale in draft format before council still stands. So there hasn't been any execution of the contract of sale. There's an appeals process that's happening at the moment with both those subject sites. Once that is come to a conclusion, those contracts will be before council as per the original motion.
Thank you so much.
So, Councillor Barwick, I'm assuming, in my examination, that sounds like a reasonable response. I'm assuming.
Yes, yes, I'm quite happy with that, and I'll withdraw that question, that motion.
Thank you kindly.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, item 7.2 on the agenda. This is a really rather substantial piece of work that has been undertaken. I know this one's been workshopped a good number of times and has consumed quite some brain power in consideration. And this one relates to the new Tasmanian planning scheme, so the draft Georgetown Local Provision Schedule and the submission to the Tasmanian Planning Commission. There is a lot of supporting documentation to consider. I want all the viewers and the listeners to know that it has indeed been considered in depth. The officer's recommendation is recorded on page 70. Do I have a mover for the officer's recommendation recorded on page 70? Thank you. Councillor Barwick is the mover. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Harris. Councillor Barwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wow, what a lot of work's gone into that document. I was sitting down when I first got it. I sat down there and started to read it, and it is so full of information. And whoever done that, and I think is it Rex? It's no, James has been involved very much with this. To me, a lot of work's gone into it. A lot better than the last one we had. I think for me to be able to understand it a lot better. And as it stands, I recommend this document, and everyone should try and get a copy of it and have it in their house. So someone asks you a question, you can answer it without having to worry too much with it as it stands. Great job on that, James. Thank you.
James nods assuredly. Good on you, mate. Councillor Harris.
Yes, I'd also like to congratulate the officer in charge. Might be some of his last work involving the Georgetown Council, apart from the handover. But he's been pretty good for the council, and it'll be sad to see him go. But I commend his work here and agree with the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris, and I echo your sentiments, James. You'll be missed, but this is certainly an enduring legacy you leave through this motion. Any other speakers for or against the motion? Anybody? Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question to James, if I might, through the chair.
Absolutely, please proceed.
Hi, James. Normally in this process, we would send a draft off to the TPC and they would come back with their comments or feedback as to see if they saw any issues with what we were going to be putting forward. I'm assuming that process has occurred.
No, so I trust everyone can hear me okay. So the process is that council endorses it and then sends it off to the commission, and then the commission undertake an assessment, and when they feel it's ready to be exhibited, it gets exhibited at that point. But if they feel that changes need to be made, then it potentially needs to come back to council for those changes to go through.
Okay, well, I'll reword my question. Has anyone from the commission seen this before it come to us to make sure there aren't any major issues? And did they have any? Have you been working with anyone there? Have there been any flags?
No, nothing's been flagged. We've been working with Lee Stevens from the Department of Justice Planning Policy Unit. So he's assisted in putting that together. So we think we've now got a document which the Commission will accept.
Great.
So that's our position at the moment.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. And I too would like to pass on my sentiments that you are a great representative while you've been working for the council. And great job.
Much. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, James and Councillor Brooks. Councillor Dawson.
Yes, James, I just had a question on the supporting report. Page 76, there's a comment there around no development within 30 metres of a coastal environment in that coastal area. And I'm just trying to get my head around what that means for the Weymouth Caravan Park area. Although it's not owned by council, it's with us under lease. And if there was movement from the community to somehow develop that space, what does that mean? How would that occur? Do we need to speak to the landowner, or are we the council by default that own under lease?
Thanks for the question. So just to clarify, I'm looking at page 70 of the supporting report at the moment.
Page 76.
What was that, sorry?
Page 76.
76, okay. And what sub-point is that on page 76?
I haven't got it directly in front of me at the moment.
Yeah, look, I mean, in general, no, it doesn't restrict and constrain future development of it from occurring. The comments in here under public land on 2.7 are generally more policy positions relating to the state coastal policy, I think. So the criteria of the new Tasmanian planning scheme will still generally allow for development to continue in the same manner that it can now.
Okay, yep, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Dawson. Thank you, James. Any further questions? No, with that, I'll put it back to Councillor Barwick.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good job, James. Bye.
Thank you. And with that, we'll put that to a vote. All those councillors in favour of the recommendation, please raise your hand. We have Councillor Keezer, Councillor Brooks, Councillor Harris, Councillor Barraclough, Councillor Parks, Councillor Dawson, Councillor Micheletto, Councillor Mason and Councillor Barwick. We have a unanimous decision. James, you're leaving on a high note. Well done. Great work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks, James.
Thank you. Item 8, Development and the Environment. There are nil. Item 9, Works and Infrastructure. Again, there are nil. Item 10, Corporate Services and Finance. We have item 10.1, which is the rating policy review. While not wanting to steal the thunder of the report, but really on account of the COVID-19 situation and the COVID hardship policy that Council has adopted, we effectively have moved to stay off any changes while the zero rate increase policy is in effect for this coming financial year. And as such, we're effectively deferring a thorough decision and a review on the rating policy. But the officer's recommendation stands at the bottom of page 75. And I will ask, is there a mover for the officer's recommendation on item 10.1 as it stands? Councillor Harris, thank you very much. Harris is our mover. Do I have a seconder for the motion, please? Thank you. Councillor Mason. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, in light of the current situation and the requirements of us by the state government, this is about the only thing we can do at this stage, and we'll look at it again towards the end of the year or next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Mason.
Nothing further, Mayor.
Thank you very much. With that, I'll open it up again. Any questions for or against? Go for it. Councillor Barwick. Councillor Barwick.
I didn't quite catch you. I thought you said another. I thought you said Parks. There are some questions that I would like to ask, and I'll have Cheryl sitting alongside of me. On page 75, their statement of principles. I noticed that we are deleting, including monthly council news. So my question is, are we no longer sending newsletters out to the community? The website, what does that actually mean? Public meetings on topical subjects, what does that actually mean? And attendances by councillors and staff at community meetings. That's one question on that top line. If through you, that the finance manager may answer that.
Thank you, Councillor Barwick. So through the chair, what I'll do is I'll first reflect to the General Manager. General Manager, if you want to pass it on to the Manager of Corporate and Finance, go for it. You run it.
I'm happy to have a first dip, but the Manager of Corporate and Finance can come in. Thank you for the question, Councillor Barwick. The reason around not including a requirement for a number of those publications as listed is that we no longer do a monthly council newsletter that goes out. We do a quarterly one. So really what that the policy was doing was requesting resources of council that weren't currently being deployed. Do you want to add to that at all, Cheryl?
No, only just to say that a number of those are no longer done, and so it's just to remove that from the policy.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Shane. Any other questions, statements, speaking?
So the answer to the website, the public meetings and the other issues that I mentioned that are on that top line of the reasons the changes are made. So what you're saying is it's saying that you are removing the format from out of the principles of community information and communications. So I don't quite understand the one about councillors and staff at community meetings.
May I, Mr Mayor, through you, Council has since adopted a community engagement strategy and framework, which,
Okay.
which outlines what it will do for all communication methods, regardless of the subject. This particular policy really narrows in what it will do in terms of communications with regard to the policy. And as Ms Hyde has already mentioned, we don't do some of these in that current format anymore. So it's probably best placed into the, or referred to through the community engagement policy, which applies to everything, rather than, I suppose, contradict that in this policy, if that makes sense.
Okay. I think that was all I wanted to question on this document. Thank you.
I'll just comment briefly. I don't have a perfect recollection of the exact intricacies, but I know that we did workshop this item, and we reviewed what the changes were. And previously there was something like I can't exactly remember the wording, so please don't hold me to this exactly, but we previously had we would report where any councillors went to any community meeting, they received any feedback, they'd return that back to council. Whereas through the community consultation process, it's something far more rigorous that we've now adopted. So it does fall by the wayside. Again, please don't hold me to it, that it may be somewhat abbreviated. Councillor Barwick?
Sorry, I muted myself. I agree with what you said, Mr. Chairman, but I needed it to be commented here at this meeting because I had already asked those questions, but I wanted it so that if anyone outside gets the document and they think, oh, what's happened here, they've got an answer now as to why we're doing it. So yes, you're right, we had discussed it. Thank you.
Good. With that, I'll return it to Councillor Harris to close.
No, nothing further to add. No.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll put that to a vote by show of hands. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, item 10.1. We have Councillor Keyser, we have Councillor Brooks, we have Councillor Parks, Barraclough, Harris, Dawson, Nicoletto, Barwick and Mason. The item is unanimous. It is passed. Thank you. Item 11, which is livable and connected communities. There are nil. Item 12 is items relating to the Mayor. And item 12.1, matters of involvement for the Mayor. You know, should we add a section in here where we because I always point to the Deputy Mayor and I said, you know, Deputy, have you done anything you want to record? Should we just say the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor? Is that, I don't know, is that defunct? No, just the Mayor? Okay, fine. So Deputy, if there's anything you want to report, just raise your hand and we'll do mine and then we'll bring you in. All right. Any questions? First, I need a mover. I beg your pardon. Do I have a mover for? Thank you. I have Councillor Parks as the mover. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dawson. Thank you. Councillor Parks.
It's just to accept the report. I don't have any questions myself. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Dawson.
Nothing there. It's fairly lean, I think, these times. Everyone trying to socially distance. It's not like you've been overly busy. I mean, is there anything missing from Zoom meetings or anything that you may need to have put down? Or
no, it pretty much is that skinny.
Yep. Okay. Thanks.
I had a hand up there from Councillor Barwick. Councillor.
Yes, I would like to ask, on the 14th of May, you attended the Mountain Bike Reference Group meeting. Can you tell me who's on that reference group?
I actually have my computer in front of me. I don't assume there's any confidentiality I need to consider.
I think so.
I think should be fine, yeah. 14. Here we go. We have Shane Power, Greg Keyser, David Richardson, Megan Bennett. In that one, I don't think we had James on that one, but James Cameron does attend. Chris Griffin from Tourism Northern Tasmania, he attended. Kevin Turner attended. Georgie also, I can't remember her name. Lou Clark attended. Gordon Scrum, I think he's our representative from Parks, who's assisting us. And Louise, I think, attended as well. There you go. Any further questions?
No, thanks.
Thank you. All right, any speakers for, against, anything else wanted before I put it back to the mover? Councillor Parks to close.
No, nothing to add. Thanks, Mayor.
All right, with that, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favour of item 12.1, please raise your hand. And again, we have a unanimous decision. Thank you very much. I record it as unanimous. Now, the one thing I did commit is Councillor Harris, anything you want to add in there? You good? All good. Okay, thank you. A lot of the time, the Deputy Mayor doesn't get recognition for the work that he does, either in supporting the Mayor or in the background. So something we need to.
Mr. Mayor, I think Councillor Dawson has his hand raised.
I don't know, it was complicated, that gesture. All right, okay, item 13, the General Manager for Council workshops. And we're reporting both workshops on Tuesday, the 28th of May and Tuesday, the 12th of May as they stand. Officer's recommendation is on page 79 that reflects those meetings.
28th of April, Mayor. Not the 28th of May.
Oh, you're quite correct. Thank you, Deputy. 28th of April and the 12th of May. Sorry, that's a...
All right, I'll keep my eye on it.
Good. It's good to know that someone's watching, man. Do I have a mover for the recommendation as it stands, please? Councillor Barraclough. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Micheletti. Thank you. Councillor Barraclough.
Nothing further to add. It is what it is.
Thank you very much. Councillor Micheletti.
Nothing further.
Any questions, statements for or against? Councillor Dawson.
Only to state that they were quite busy. Our last few workshops have been pretty well packed full of information, and it's yeah, getting bigger. I think we're almost at a point where we need to have throw in an extra workshop sometime because we just seem to be pressed for time. But anyway, maybe something to look at in our planning for the meetings in future.
Thank you, Councillor Dawson. Councillor Mason.
I'll be missed off the attendance there, Mayor, for May.
So you're talking about the
Workshop.
Oh, there you go. You have been missed off. You were. You did attend.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No
Thanks.
worries.
We'll add that on. Thank you, Councillor. I can certainly vouch for your attendance. I know you were there. All right. With that, I assume there are no more speakers or questions. Last chance before I put that back to the mover. Councillor Barraclough to close.
Nothing. Time to close.
Let's put
Mr.
that
Mayor.
onto a vote. Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, is that the case in both workshops? Mr. Mason, Councillor Mason has. I see his name's been omitted from both.
Both. That is correct.
Okay, so we need to correct those. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I made amendments on my written copy, which I'll return to Louise if there's any questions. Okay, we'll put that to a vote. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation of 13.1, please raise your hand.
Councillor Dawson has left the meeting, by the way.
Thank you for recording that. Thank you. Councillor Dawson has left the meeting. Louise, if you can just record that, please. We have Councillor Keyser, Councillor Brooks, Councillor Harris, Councillor Barraclough, Councillor Parks, Councillor Micheletti, and Councillor Mason. Councillor Barwick, are you against or for the motion? Just come off mute, please.
Were you referring to my hand?
Yes.
Yeah, look, it goes off. I put it up as soon as you call it, but it just disappears.
Yes.
Thank you.
Are you for the motion?
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you. Just clarity.
Yeah, that's fine.
Councillor Dawson, we recorded you as having left the meeting, so the vote has transpired. Not that it was needed. 8-0 with Councillor Dawson having left the meeting. Thank you. Thank you. Right, item 13.2 is the draft interpretation strategy, another comprehensive body of work. I've got to find the officer's recommendation is on the bottom of page 83.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that this interpretation strategy go to the next available workshop for further discussion.
So the councillor is moving for a deferment.
Thank you.
As the chair, given it's a procedural matter and a deferment, as the chair, I'm not going to accept your response. I believe that you truly do have every bit of information you need to make a decision on this one. So the procedural motion is not accepted. I ask again, do I have a move?
Mr. Chairman, point of order here. We had this an address by a group of people, came to the council table. We were all everywhere. They addressed us at the last workshop. We as a council did not get to sit down as a group and address the issues. We listened to two people talk to us about this interpretation strategy. There were a couple of comments made by a couple of councillors, two questions that were said by the people. But as a council, we did not sit around and discuss some of the issues in here, to me, that we needed to really sit and discuss as a council. I've seen the report, and that's why I wanted to go to be a procedural motion. And I believe we should really be discussing this as a group. When we were at that meeting, you straight away, when they left, we all said, anything to ask? No, we didn't at the time of the people that were there. Then when it was over, you then said, we'll move on to the next item. We never got to discuss the issues. That's why I'm asking that, and you're refusing it.
We're first going to move to the General Manager to reply, and then I'll state my position.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, only that I think it'll help clarify the situation or that Councillor Barwick's moving. This particular strategy has been before Council on two occasions. Once was by the consultant presenting on the 10th of March, and then it was at council workshop on the 12th of May more recently, where there was discussion around it. I feel as though you may be referring to the next agenda item. Certainly this one has had conversation and input around the table from council, including discussion around the font size and presentation of the document, which has been reflected in what's attached today.
And so in my determination, I'm still hold my line, Councillor Barwick. I believe that there's been plenty of consideration and time allocated to this. I really do believe that the council does have all the information it needs to vote in an informed capacity on this motion, or this agenda item, should I say. So your procedural motion is declined. So on that, I will ask, is there a mover of the recommendation? Councillor Mason and Councillor Micheletto is the seconder. Councillor Mason and Councillor Micheletto. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Mayor. I probably spent 15 to 20 hours with this gentleman on this draft interpretation strategy. Martin, I think his name was.
Oh, yes.
It's a very, very complex subject, actually, and he's a very, very complex gentleman. But it does take a lot of understanding, and to be honest with you, I'm not 100% understanding of the whole process, but it's something that needs to be done. So I'll put the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Micheletti.
So I guess the plan covers all the strategic issues or requirements we should be looking at over the next 10 years. Everything seems to be there of where we should be concentrating, and you know, detail, I guess, is not a key factor at this present stage.
Thank you very much. Any speakers for or against the motion, or any questions? Councillor Parks.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I speak in favour of the draft interpretation strategy. I think it's really great to finally see council say to the community that we're fearlessly going to look at our natural and cultural assets, including Aboriginal and colonial assets, along together. I think that's probably the first time in my time at Georgetown that that's been thoroughly put forward by the council as a strategy. I really look forward to seeing the Aboriginal community have equal recognition within, you know, how we celebrate the colonial stuff. We can celebrate our Aboriginal culture along with that. I think that's a really great thing for council to be doing. I think it aligns well with future endeavours, and it'd be great to see the RAP involved along with these strategies also. I think it'd be great to see those community features that we all know about, and they're listed there, you know, the conflict, the female factory, the mines at Lefroy, the holiday. You know, there's some wonderful photos of the 1930s and 40s of Georgetown. Georgetown's actually bristling with holiday makers from down the Tamar River, from Launceston, all those things that are listed in there. I think it's really refreshing and great to see, and I look forward to seeing you know, what comes from that strategy and how we can actually use that for our tourists and internal marketing, our community pride, our understanding of our own local history and identity. I think it's a great start, and with all strategies and of such nature, we can grow on those, we can adapt, we can change, we can keep listening. I think it's a great start. It's got a lot of encouraging things and a lot of things that I think certain specific parts of our community will actually embrace and celebrate seeing in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parks. Any further speakers to the motion? Councillor Dawson.
I think it's something that we've cried out for as a community for a long time. If we don't know who we are and what we've got, how can anyone else be expected? We sort of started on this journey by asking the question, how do we sell ourselves? What do we do? What do we say to someone when they ask us, what is there on offer in Georgetown if I come and stay there? And I mean, this strategy populates that, it puts some meat on the bones, and we can actually go forward and start to guide some new developments and grant chasing opportunities, similar to what we've done with the mountain bike trails and that type of thing. I think it's another springboard that we can use as a community to actually get out there and sell ourselves and put our best foot forward. So I'm fully supportive.
Thank you. With the council's permission, I'd like to just comment and speak to the motion myself. I think the key thing here is that this is exactly as Councillor Parks indicated, it is a start. We now have a register of what we have in terms of marketability and resources, cultural, natural, all these different things. It's a working document, and I think that it's appropriately termed a draft interpretation strategy. So I fully commend with what's been done. It gives us at least an intellectual asset base from which to use, from which to draw our planning. At least we can now say with some level of confidence that we haven't missed something glaringly that we could put into our mix. We now at least know what we know, and we now at least have a clear understanding of what we don't really understand as well. All of these things have inherent value. So I wholly endorse what's been done. I think it's been a good exercise and, quite frankly, money well invested. Councillor Barwick, your hand came up fleetingly.
Yeah, it comes up, but it doesn't fully, it just disappears.
Yeah.
Look, The reason that I wanted this, Mr. Chairman, to go to a workshop, in that document, if people have read the back of that document, there's a the executive summaries. They talk about the interpretation, some of a curator. They need a curator and interpretation of a professional person, key interpretation, volunteers, and currents and grants base. Now, part 2 refers to a digital platform, the council form and interpretation working group, and it refers to that as being sourced by a council officer, a curation, interpretation, professional, key interpretation volunteers, and a recurrent and grants-based budget. Now, another section of it, and it talks about the key action is commissioning of additional resource. Then there's the recreation adventure work group. Now that is an objective 2. That has on that they are looking to have there are experience initiatives, off-road mountain bikes, 4-wheel drives, and attractions. And it also refers to the Hillwood volcano rock climbing as an adventure seekers attraction. Now, we all know, or those that have been involved with going to the meetings that we met with our country areas, that the volcano at Hillwood is not something that is available at the moment for a public to be able to go and use, because of these people do not want that. That's in that report. They are also looking at forming an interpretation working group through an existing committees that are already happening out in their area out there, and that's to consist of a council officer, a curation interpretation professional, again on grant basing, grant fund basing. The thing is that there's so many other little groups that are looking to be set up in this issue, which this is why I wanted it to come to a workshop, so that we could look at the impact of the groups and the local regions and that's happening here. So I don't know whether people had looked at it to the extent that I had looked at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barwick. If there are no further questions or speakers, I'll put it out one last time. I'll return that to Councillor Mason to close.
Thank you, Mayor. Well said, Councillor Parks. Just a note that this strategy was discussed at a workshop, and I think Martin also gave a good presentation at the World Cafe, which most councillors attended. So I think it's been well resourced so far, so quite happy to put the motion there.
Thank you very much. Let's put that one to a vote. By show of hands, all those in favour of item 13.2, please raise your hand. We have Councillor Keyser, Councillor Brooks, Councillor Parks, Councillor Barraclough, Councillor Harris, Councillor Dawson, Councillor Micheletto, Councillor Mason. All those opposed to the motion, please indicate. Councillor Barwick is opposed. The motion is carried 8-1. Thank you. This is actually a good meeting to see so many of these bodies of work really come forward. I have a show of hands before I've done anything. Councillor Barwick.
Sorry.
All good, okay. So item 13.3, which relates to community pride in Georgetown. It's quite a comprehensive report and quite a significant body of work.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that procedural motion that this goes to a workshop for further discussion. Thank you.
Can you validate why you?
I need a seconder before I can.
Before you even second it, have you got a reason why you believe it needs to go back to workshop?
Yes, back to workshop. I mean, this again came to we as a council. I mean, there's some people that are obvious to what's happening around the community, and there's others that are not. But this document, to me, Mr. Chairman, has a lot of information in the back. It has a lot of costings in the back. It also, at the same time, has at our workshop when Lou Clark was here, Jason was here, they were our two workers, two people were addressing our council. We never addressed the issue. It was on our workshop, but we never addressed this item as a council after they left. And I just think that we have to sit down and discuss some of these things that are in these big reports that we don't do collectively. I see Peter shaking his head, but Peter's on that committee, so you know, it's just how I believe, and I'd ask for a seconder for it to go to a workshop.
So just councillor,
Mr. Chairman, can you put it to the vote, please?
No, I don't actually have to. This is what I'm seeking clarity.
Oh, God.
As the chair, I'm assuming that I can make a determination. I don't necessarily have a seconder first, because I'm currently leaning towards declining.
Mr. Mayor, if you want to not accept the procedural motion, you simply must give reason as to why you do not accept that.
Doesn't need a seconder. That's my read of the act as well. So I have the prerogative. Again, it's a deferment, and I believe that every bit of information has been provided. I really don't see the need for this to return to workshop a further time. So I'm going to unfortunately decline your request, Councillor Barwick. I believe that we're adequately furnished with information to make an informed decision on this item. So with that, I'll return back to item 13.3. The recommendation is at the bottom of page 86, which in essence is to endorse the policy. Do I have a mover, please? I'll call one more time for item 13.3. Do I have a mover? Councillor Parks. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dawson. Thank you. Councillor Parks.
Thanks, Mayor. I do struggle a bit when councillors don't inform themselves. This has been going for months and months and months. Snippets of information come back via the general manager through the Filt table. We've had the Will Cafe. We've had newspaper articles, radio articles. We've had a survey that's been in the community and garnered nearly 600 voices. This has been well known and well publicised. I struggle to understand how you couldn't be more informed about the work that's being done in the community in regards to Filt, the collective impact stuff, and the offshoot of that, which was the community pride stuff, something recognised a few years ago as being one of the main issues for a lot of people in the community, that they didn't feel pride within their community, and so the Filt decided that there would be one of their platforms that they would address early on, and this is the result of all that information which has been garnered by a lot of work in the community and ongoing work, something that we will continue to do for many years, I'd imagine, continue to seek those voices. What you have before you in that recommendation is not just a collaboration of a small amount of people and council officers. It's actually, that's the small number. The big number that you need to consider is those 500 to 600 voices which are there in that report. None of those recommendations came from individuals. They came from the community. That is the community's voice. These things are addressing the community's concerns or wishes around pride and how they feel pride in their community. That is the accumulation of that, the coming together of that, the ideas and the aspirations of our community. It's a wonderful, magnificent. It's so good to see this finally in front of council, so they can say we can actually do something. If anything, I find it a little disappointing that we can't actually fund these things straight away, and we will have to go searching for grants. One of the things recognised earlier on within collective impact for the community, that Georgetown fell victim many times to political cycles, and that things would come to Georgetown and you'd end up with this reputation of, oh, here comes another thing, and oh, it's gone again, nothing ever lasts in Georgetown. And that started to form this pride issue, which now we're addressing. We're actually bringing this, so it's not a political cycle that, or dependent on political cycles. It's actually been driven from the community up. We as leaders in the community are just receiving the voice of the community. This is not a platform that someone's decided to stand on. This is the community's voice, the community's platform, hundreds of people's voices, and we intend to get hundreds more voices. So I'm actually delighted. I was hoping someone else would put the motion so I could speak to it as perhaps as a second or as just as a councillor. But I'm delighted to be able to put that forward and say, this is the community's voice. This is wonderful stuff. This is why I think we all become councillors, to be able to do this kind of thing. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Parks. Councillor Dawson as seconder.
Once again, Councillor Parks has said it all. This is something that our community voice has spoken to us after we've gone out and we've said, what do you need? And then they've come back and they've told us exactly what they need and what they want to do to be able to demonstrate and encourage pride in our community. And I mean, let's crack on and do it. I mean, this is their voice. This is what we're here for. We need to do it.
Thank you, Councillor Dawson. Any other speakers, commenters, for or against, questions? Just open it up. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, and I agree with everything that Councillor Parks and Councillor Dawson just said. I guess my question is, and I'm not sure who the right person to answer it is, what is the connection? What is the actual hierarchy? I mean, I've previously asked if this is part of is it a council group? It's a community group, it's a field group. Why do they need endorsement from council is, I guess, the connection I'm trying to make. If someone could explain that would be great. Thank you.
I think through the chair to the general manager, who I think is established on most of these bodies and understands the operational model. Shane? So
it's twofold, really. Well, before I get to the operational model, it's not a council group, although we have council law representation on it and officer representation on it. The reason I was seeking council endorsement of it is twofold. One is that the Community Pride project is aimed to meet an annual plan action of councils. So that'll satisfy that particular action in this year's annual plan actions for council. And secondfold is that when council at a later date determines its priority projects and potential budgets and co-contributions or whatever it might be, or seeks grants to do different things, these documents will be endorsed by council and have greater strength if you choose to pursue any of these initiatives that are in here. Likewise, with the interpretation strategy previously discussed, there might be initiatives in there that other groups pick up or not, but council may choose to pursue those in one fashion or another, and that just adds strength if it's endorsed. But this one also includes an annual plan action.
Thank you.
Councillor Brooks, are you happy that you've received a reasonable response?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Questions?
Just recording that Councillor Harris seems to have left the chair.
Thank you. Look, I'm going to just put my oar in and just say, what a fabulous piece of work. I just am so thrilled with what the community has done. And mostly it's them. They have finally given us direction on what their hopes and dreams and aspirations and the challenges and the problems. We have a point of departure, and with that we're informed, and we can be a better council, and we can help have a hand in driving better outcomes. So couldn't be more thrilled that firstly, we've had the backing to do this piece of work, that secondly, we've had the incredibly unselfish people in our community who have undertaken this work. And to be finally receiving this today, I think that we're armed to be more effective in short. So just thoroughly delighted. Thank you. We'll close it up. If anyone else has anything to say, otherwise I'll hand it back to Councillor Parks to close. Councillor Parks.
I think it's all been said, Mayor. Again, just to reinforce that this is your community's voice. So I thank the councillors for the debate. Thank you.
With that, we'll put that to a vote. All those in favour of item 13.3, the recommendation recorded on the bottom of page 86, please raise your hand. Councillor Keyser, Councillor Brooks, Councillor Parks, Councillor Barraclough, Councillor Harris, Councillor Dawson, Councillor Micheletto, Councillor Mason, and Councillor Barwick. We have a unanimous decision. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, before we move to 13.4, I'd just like to confirm that at agenda item 13.2, that motion has recorded Councillor Brooks in the affirmative. If we could, before moving on, please.
So let's just, so 13.2, did you say?
Yeah, that was a decision immediately preceding this one, just to confirm that Councillor Brooks has been recorded in the affirmative.
Yes, she should be recorded in the affirmative in the notes. So my notes reflect that the only person who opposed was Councillor Barwick on that one.
Okay. That's okay. That was noted and we're duly corrected now. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Good catch. Thank you. All right. Item 13.4, the NTDC, the Northern Tasmanian Development Corporation. And this item relates to the draft members agreement, which will run for the next 3 years to the close of 2023. The recommendation is captured on the bottom of page 92. Do I have a mover for item 13.4 and the officer's recommendation as it stands? Councillor Harris, thank you very much. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mason, thank you very much. Councillor Harris.
Fairly comprehensive agreement, and one that we're spending a bit of money on and probably need to be covered with all the ins and outs of the agreement. So I'll recommend that, and also recommend the fact that we have a continued alliance with the NTDC. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Councillor Mason.
I agree with Councillor Harris there. I think this organisation will be very, very handy to us in the next 2 or 3 years. Everything comes out like we could just go into the next 2 or 3 years. They'll be very handy. Money well spent.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Any questions?
Harris has left.
So, Councillor Harris, I can see you in the background. You can't leave the meeting while you've got a motion live.
The meeting, mate. I can hear everything.
Fantastic. Just confirming that.
Accuracy, though, please, Louise, if you can just indicate that from 2:31 to 2:33, Councillor Harris left the meeting. He's now back in attendance. Just a window.
Mate, it was 30 seconds.
Yeah, let's just cover our bases in case there are any objections. I wasn't actually watching it too closely, but it was about a minute or so, something like that. Thank you, Councillor Barraclough, for pointing that out. Okay, so we'll go back. Any speakers to the recommendation? Any questions, speakers for or against? Councillor Barwick.
Mr. Chairman, we've had a long association with NTD, and quite often I've sat here along with other councillors and thought, well, really, what have you done for Georgetown? They collect our money, but, you know, we've not seen a lot of work. So let's hope there's a 3-year window here, and if we, they're either going to do what we have expected of them, or at the 3rd year when we look at renewing the 3-year agreement, we may be saying no next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bug. I'll put my oar in here to speak to the motion. So I think it's safe to say, and I don't think it'd be too controversial to say, that there have been some questions about the efficacy of the group in the past. There has been some considerable work in terms of redrafting the Constitution, and there's also been a significant headcount turnover to realign some of the resources to be more outcome focused. I'm delighted to say that I've been volunteering in this group and was involved in the recruitment of the new CEO, Mark Baker, who is, I think, a very strong hire. He comes with a high energy level, and he's already proven to be a man who's focused on deliverables, which I think is a point of tremendous encouragement. I think for the next 2 to 3 years, given the world we live in with post-COVID-19, as well as a number of significant economic projects that will probably generationally affect Georgetown as a community, and in particular, I'm pointing to hydrogen. Now more than ever, we have a vested interest in having a central coordinating organization that can lift our agenda up the priority tree and up the engagement tree, so that we get the appropriate amount of airtime that we required. Although currently, I'd have to say, in general, we seem to be getting a very, very good platform. So for me, I think it is money well spent. Having said that, I'm certainly going to acknowledge Councillor Barwick's point. I think that you need to be focused on outcomes. You need to be focused on deliverables. And, time will see. I have a high degree of confidence in the cast and the personnel, as well as the Constitution and the way that it is currently structured. But certainly in 3 years' time, we need to have the confidence in our own assessment of whether or not the organisation has been successful in delivering outcomes for our community, and make our further funding contributions contingent on that level of delivery. Wow, that was quite a diatribe. Anybody else? Great, we'll return that to Councillor Harris to close.
Nothing further to add, Your Honour.
Thank you. Got a promotion. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. We'll put that to vote. All those in favour of item 13.4, the officer's recommendation. Councillor Keyser, Brooks, Harris, Barraclough, Parks, Micheletto, Dawson, Barwick and Mason. We have a unanimous decision, 9-0. Thank you very much. Item 14, petitions. There are none. Item 15, notices of motion. Item 15.1, we have a notice of motion for submissions on legislative changes by council from Ms. Brooks. Do I have a mover for the item as it stands in the pack? Do I have a mover? Assuming that, of course, Councillor Brooks is the mover. Councillor Brooks. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Harris. Councillor Brooks.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I don't need to really labour over it, but basically all I'm requesting is that any legislative changes that come through, particularly those that impact the role of the councillor, that they're brought to council in sufficient time to prepare a submission.
Yep. Councillor Harris.
Well, I reckon I fairly well agree with that. We should know what we're supposed to be doing.
Can't argue with that. Anybody else for, against, comments, questions, remonstrations?
I just, through the chair, if I could, with the permission of Councillor Brooks, may want to make an amendment to the grammar in the motion, where it reads "they want, would like." So if we just want to correct that for the benefit of the minutes through Councillor Brooks, if you're happy with that.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Pure grammar, so it doesn't alter the bearing. It doesn't look like we have any speakers or commenters on it. So with that, Councillor Brooks, I'll hand it back to you.
Yes, so, and this came about because of the major projects legislation change, but it just prompted me to think, well, I'm not sure whether we know all about the different legislative changes that come through. I think the commentary from the GM was that the staff or the officers had reviewed it and didn't see any issues, which I'm sure they didn't from their point of view, but they're not wearing our hats. So I feel it would be appropriate for them to come to us to comment on. It may not, it may be that we don't prepare one, but at least we should have the option.
Yeah. Thank you very much. With that, I'll put the item to a vote. All those in favour of item 15.1, please raise your hand. Councillor Keyser, Councillor Brooks, Councillor Harris, Councillor Barraclough, Parks, Micheletti, Dawson, Barwick and Mason. We have a unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, item 16, which is councillors' questions with or without notice. And we have got, I think it is 4 questions consecutively from Councillor Barwick. The questions and responses are recorded in the agenda pack. So I'll point everybody to item 16.1, 16.2. In respect, I will just mention that the first question relates to enforcement of vegetation protection at 139 Hillwood Road and 105 Main Road in Hillwood. The second question relates to the Weymouth Boat Ramp Grant. The third question relates to the Hillwood Football Ground boundary realignment. And the fourth question relates to the Bell Bay Industrial Precinct Plan. The responses are recorded and noted from the General Manager. Thank you. Item 17, Council Committee report.
Mr. Chairman, before you move on, just a comment that I'd like to make note on the minutes that to do with the boat ramp at Weymouth, I think someone needs to go out there urgently and have a look because the rocks and that are hardly even under the high water mark now. It's pretty bad out there now. Just make note for that. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment. Having said that, the recommendation does talk to a significant budget and engineering undertaking, so I'm pretty confident that that's being undertaken. Councillor Parks, do you want to comment?
Mayor, I just wonder, this part of the agenda is, I just wondered if I could bring a topic up and you can advise me if this is a place to do it or not. But I do wonder if council could investigate having our own local meeting procedures for councillors. It just seems to be that the council meetings going forward are really mixed up, and I just wondered if that might assist councillors if we had a lockfast, something we could talk about. Perhaps officers could prepare something for us to have our own local procedures. I know that's within the Act to be able to do that. Is this the place to discuss that, or do I need to move a motion? Or
I'm not. So let's just work on good faith here. So, Mr. General Manager, if I can ask you to just create a workshop item so we can take this to debate at our workshop. I'll review with you and seek some recommendations.
Okay.
The request is noted. Thank you, Councillor Parks.
Thank you.
All right. Item 17 is Council Committee reports. There are none. That leads us to item 18, which is effectively to move into closed meeting. So item 18.1, do I have a mover, please? Councillor Barraclough has a hand up, and Councillor Harris. Councillor Barraclough. Councillor Harris. Councillor Barraclough.
Nothing to say. Let's go to closed meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Harris.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barwick, it looks like you want to talk to a point.
No, I was jumping ahead with my move into closed session.
Okay. In that case, anybody want to say anything about moving to closed session? None. Councillor Barraclough, anything to add in closing?
Nothing.
Thank you. Let's put that to a vote. All those in favour of moving to closed session? The motion is we're missing one hand. So it's Councillor Keyser, Councillor Brooks, Councillor Parks, Councillor Barraclough, Councillor Harris, Councillor Dawson, Councillor Micheletti, Councillor Mason. For Councillor Barwick, I'm going to assume is against.
No, I told you that I'd put my moving into motion early.
Okay, so now that I've seen your hands, we make that 9-0, so it's unanimous. We move.
Oh, dear.
And the time recorded is 2:44.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Having resolved to move into closed session, I'll now stop recording.
Thank you very much. Being no.
Sorry, Councillor, Mr. Mayor, just confirming that recording has commenced now that you've moved out of closed session.
Thank you, Shane. Much appreciated. And having said that, there being no further business, The meeting of the Georgetown Council of the 26th of May is now closed at 3:24. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll now stop recording.